Hi, so before the video starts, I am popping in here in the middle of the night while I'm editing. So basically, most of you have already seen the book cover and the sprayed edges, but now the first edition will also have a gold foil stamped case and printed end papers inside the book. So if you're pre-ordering the book, that's some extra stuff for you to look forward to. Hope you're excited for that. Now I am gonna let you go to start the actual video. Now that I finally announced my book, this video is going to be one of many videos in a series about my publishing process and my writing process, starting with the very first step in the publishing process, which is querying and finding my literary agent. I figured that this video series would be interesting to everyone because we have fans and supporters who will get behind the scenes content and learn about what publishing is like. We have writers whose favorite hobby besides writing is comparing themselves to other people. We have haters who might be lurking on this channel to figure out how much being an influencer gave me a book deal. And we have racist people who might want to catfish as a Vietnamese author next time, and so they want to take notes. So either way, it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So in this video, I'm going to go through the querying process to find a literary agent. I will talk about the structure that most query letters have, including reading aloud my own query letter, because I know you guys want the tea. And I'll also talk about what I could have done better in that letter. And then the very last thing will be how much being a content creator helped with querying and getting an agent in the first place. I hope that everyone knows that my querying process is not the standard or the norm. This is not a how-to guide. This is literally just sharing what it was like for me because I know people are curious. It's a different journey for everyone. And I feel like when you are deciding on a literary agent for your book, it's a very personal decision, similar to how finding the right therapist or the right doctor is so personal. Fortunately, that process is easier with websites like ZocDoc, which is the sponsor of today's video. The best therapist I've ever had was an Asian woman, and I think a large part of her compassion and empathy for my issues was because of our shared background. So that's what ZocDoc helps with, finding someone who feels right for you. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choosing the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment, from mental health to dentistry, eye care, skincare, and everything in between. ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers. With ZocDoc, you can filter for doctors by insurance, location, and specialties, so you can choose the best, most convenient care for you. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even score same-day appointments. ZocDoc lets you do everything online, sometimes even the same day. I'm someone who needs to read reviews about the doctor, so the fact that they have verified patient reviews and detailed doctor profiles is a huge deal for me to get a sense of what they're like before I even step into the office. Go to ZocDoc.com/readwithcindy to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to it. First, let's talk about what is a literary agent and what is querying in the first place. So literary agent is basically someone who acts as the middleman between the author and publisher. This is going to be the person that represents you and your book and negotiates the contract and the book deals. They are someone who has a lot more industry knowledge and connections to other people in publishing. Agents typically get 15 to 20% of their author's advances and royalties. So some people skip having an agent altogether because they want to have more control over the business side of things, or they don't want to give up a percentage of their earnings to another person, especially when publishing pays so little. But other writers might want to get an agent because of that person's connections and knowledge about the industry, and also the fact that there are some publishers out there that don't accept book pitches unless it comes from an agent. For me personally, I wanted an agent because I did not want to deal with any of the business side of things. I hate negotiating for money or acting like a salesperson for myself, especially because I'm not like a full-time author or even like a full-time YouTuber. So the money and the business side of things is just not relevant enough for me to devote that extra time in learning all of these things and negotiating through the whole process. I just want someone else to be the businesswoman and I'm off doing my own thing in La La Land. You know that meme where someone's like, what's going on in the economy? And then the person's like, don't worry about it, kitten. And they're like, yay, okay. That's basically me. That being said, I want a good agent so that I can make sure that my incompetence doesn't get taken advantage of. And that's where querying comes in. So what is a query letter? This is basically a one-page letter that a writer would send to a literary agent asking them to consider representing you and your book. And ideally, you should send this letter when your book is as close to being done as possible. So in the letter, which is typically going to be an email, it will have things like the book title, the genre, the word count, a brief brief synopsis and your short author bio. And typically you would also include a preview of your first chapter or the first 300 words, just so that they can take a glance and see your writing style and make sure that your writing is not dookie. Depending on the agent, you might also have to submit a synopsis, which is basically 1 to 2 pages that summarizes your entire story from beginning to end. But basically, when you get to the stage where you are ready to send your query out to people, you're gonna have to figure out which agents to send the query to. These agents should be people that represent your genre and hopefully your specific subgenre, and they have to be open for query letters in the first place, because there are lots of agents that will close their inboxes during specific times of the year, because as you can imagine, agents are constantly bombarded with every single person on planet Earth that wants to write a novel. The way that I found which agents to query, or I thought would be a good match for my book, was basically when I used to be active on book Twitter, I had followed other people in the book community and other authors, and the algorithm would end up recommending me literary agents as well. So during that time, way before I was even ready to query, I started keeping bookmarks of agents that could potentially be of interest. And I was also looking up agents of whatever book that I was reading or other authors that I liked, because typically they will mention their agent in their biography or in their book's acknowledgments. But there are much more straightforward ways for other people to find agents. You can go to manuscriptwishlist.com or writersdigest.com or querytracker.net. Those websites are set up specifically for you to filter out agents that would be fitting for you. You can also Google literary agent in whatever specific genre you have your book in, or you can look up the hashtag MSWL on Twitter or Blue Sky, because agents will sometimes use that hashtag to mention what they are currently looking for in manuscripts. There are different ways that people can approach sending out query letters. What I heard was to send them in batches instead of just sending them all at once. And the reason for that is you want to wait until you see responses from your first batch of agents. And if you get rejections all across the board, that might be a sign that you need to go back and revise your query letter or your manuscript. But on the other hand, if you're getting positive momentum or interest from your first batch, that can be a sign that it's okay for you to move forward to your next batch, and so on and so forth. So for that reason, some people save their top choice dream agents to be in a future batch instead of the first batch. So that way, by the time the query letter gets sent to your ideal agent, hopefully by then it would be the most revised that it can be. But because it can take months for agents to get back to you, some people might want to pitch their first choice agents right away. So this is like a personal decision for everybody. A lot of times writers will create a spreadsheet to keep track of which agents that they query because of all of that reasoning I just listed. Now, I could not find my spreadsheet because it's been 2 to 3 years. So instead, here's a screenshot of an example spreadsheet that I put together just so that you can get an idea of what mine looked like. It was not anything special. I just separated based on batches, and then I would color code based on how much I really wanted this agent. Green would be a dream agent, yellow would be a good agent, and then maybe orange would be an agent that I'm fine with, but they're not at the top of my list for whatever reason. Obviously, you don't want to query agents that you're not interested in at all, because then I think you're just wasting everybody's time. And so in the spreadsheet, I would have columns for agent and the agency that they belong in, because a lot of times when you send a query letter to one agent, you can't query another person within that same agency. You have to wait until you get rejected from that person before you can query, or you can email that original person to let them know you're gonna withdraw your letter so that you can query the other agent within that same agency. And so typically the agency itself, as the company, they're gonna have their roles listed on their website. So some of them might not even care if you contact multiple people in the same company, or they might say if you get a rejection from one person, that's a rejection from everyone. So again, it's just one of those things where like you should be mindful of what their rules are and pay attention to them. Most of the agencies that I looked at had the rule where you can only query one agent at a time. So it was helpful for me to know in my spreadsheet, if I got rejected by an agent in one agency, I can just cross them off the list and know that I now have permission to send my letter to another person in the same agency if I feel like they might be a good fit. I also had a column for which dates that I sent the query letter so that I can make sure everyone's timelines were similar. I also had a column for notes, which is basically if I got rejected by someone or if they followed up asking for the full manuscript and I was moving forward with them. Obviously, from the screenshot, my spreadsheet is very bare bones. Some writers get super detailed with their spreadsheet, like writing down the submission method and the recent book deals that this agent has process or what method you need to query them. I just kept mine simple. I decided for each batch, I would have 1 or 2 of my top choice agents, and then the rest would be other people that I felt more medium about, just to test the waters. But another thing that I did was, for my first batch of people, I focused on agents that were on my list but had faster response rates. And you can find this out from querytracker.net and other websites. The reason why I wanted to prioritize faster response rates was so that I could get a temperature check early on about whether my pitch was working or not. Because once an agent replies back to me asking for the full manuscript to read from, then I know to send my query letters out to the next batch while the first batch reviews the manuscript. The one thing I would caution about this method though is that if you end up having an agent that is a very fast responder and then they end up being really interested in your manuscript or even giving you an offer, that's going to speed up the timelines of every other agent that you're querying in, and that's going to reduce the time frame where they are able to review the full manuscript and give you an answer within a week or 2 weeks or a month after the original agent gave you an offer. And a lot of agents might not be willing to abide by such a compressed time frame, and they might decide to just step aside and let you go with the original offer. And so that's up to you if you're even fine with the original offer to begin with. So basically with this strategy, it could lend itself to having a more aggressive timeline, and that could be riskier with getting more rejections. And so that's why it is totally up to you how you want to approach these things. Obviously, I felt more okay with being a little bit more aggressive with my timeline because I had that comfort of my privilege and my platform, and also my impatience. The query letter that you sent should not run more than 1 page. It should ideally be around 200 to 450 words. Mine was just a little bit above that, which is another reason why you should not see my query letter as a good example. How the letter works is you have your opening. With this opening, you can do a couple of different things. You can either start with your story, like maybe you start with a hook about what world we're into or what problem your main character has. Or you can be more informational about the title or genre or word count, or you can mention whatever personal connection you have with the agent, like if you were referred by someone or if you've met this person before. So those are generally like the 3 different ways you could have your opener. Definitely a requirement that you should have in your query letter though is the title, the word count, and the genre. Some people put this in their opening paragraph, some people put it in the very last paragraph. And then you should also have generally 2 comparative titles of other books that you can compare your book to. And this is so that agents can get an idea of how marketable the book is. I personally don't like this requirement because I think publishing leans way too hard into making the same copies of proven success stories rather than taking a risk with something different. So unfortunately, that's just the game that we gotta play. And generally good comparison titles are books that have been released recently within the past few years, or referencing an author that is actively publishing. Obviously, they should have the same audience and genre as your book. And then we have the middle section, which is what the story is about. And so you gotta summarize the premise of the book. You don't have to explain every single thing that happens in the story from beginning to end, because that's the point of the synopsis document. That's like a separate thing. But for the query letter itself, it's just like the premise. And the last thing to have in the query letter is the author bio. And so this is basically if you have written other books or published before, or if you've done just any writing for like journals or anthologies or whatever, if you've won any awards, or if you have a profession that is relevant to your story. Okay, so now let's share my query letter. I have procrastinated on making this video because I don't like that one of the first impressions that you're gonna have of my book is gonna be an old query letter from like 2 years ago that, in my opinion, is not great. Again, I don't think you should view this as an example of a query letter that you should try to write, but it's okay. I will also nitpick the letter so that you can learn from my mistakes. Okay, so I'm gonna read the letter that I sent to the agent that I have now. For context, this is her wish list on manuscriptwishlist.com. These are some of the relevant lines that I clocked for my query letter. Tao is actively looking for upper middle grade and YA, whether in prose or graphic novel format and across genres that are clever, heartfelt, and commercial. She's especially drawn to character-driven stories about family and friendships from the the POV of diverse protagonists. She adores stories with a touch of magic and whimsy and is a lifelong fan of mythology and fairy tales. She's interested in all things gothic, cottagecore, and dark academia. Later down in the page, there's a part where she says, I am a fan of ships that have the vibe of the Princess Mononoke knife scene. She also says, while I enjoy GRRM and Tolkien, I'm not the best agent for adult epic fantasies unless it's particularly character driven. So overall, this raised a lot of green flags for me. And if you watch my announcement video where I talk about my book, that pretty much checks all of my boxes. And that is why I decided to query her. So here is the letter that I sent. Dear Tao Li, as you're seeking manuscripts with character driven stories, cottagecore fairy tales, and ships that emulate the Princess Mononoke knife scene, I am reaching out with The Secret World of Briar, a 100k word fantasy novel. Told in alternating timelines between present day and 100 years ago, this queer Sleeping Beauty retelling shares the explorations of grief and escapism found in Alex E. Harrow's A Spindle Splintered and the ethereal, horror-esque atmosphere of Crystal Sutherland's House of Hollow. 100 years have passed since Princess Amelia fell into eternal slumber, leaving the kingdom of Gildan impoverished and lawless. At least that's what the fairy tales claim. Jaded 18-year-old thief Corinne doesn't believe in fables, even when she ventures inside Gildan's underground tunnels to search for her sister, Ellie, who ran away to find the sleeping princess in hopes for a better life. But there Corinne discovers the ruins of the old castle, maintained by beings from the kingdom's golden age who protect a hidden portal into Amelia's subconscious, until Corinne accidentally falls in and seals the entry behind her. Corinne finds Ellie within the lush world of Amelia's dreams, where they meet beautiful shapeshifter Briar Rose and her demon companion Malicene. As the sisters explore ice castles, sunflower mazes, and star-filled oceans, Corinne suspects Briar Rose is hiding darker secrets behind her perfect paradise, and that there are some things their subconscious can't bury forever. 100 years before, Princess Amelia's childhood in Gildan is closely guarded by her fairy godmothers. Cursed to fall asleep at 18, Amelia vows to give birth to an heir who will continue the family's enchanted bloodline. But when she marries a prince she doesn't love instead of the woman she does, living in reality becomes more frightening than the curse that promised her escape. She seeks Malicene's help in finding the other world, an alternate realm believed to have been discovered by an ancient Gildan king. As their plans go awry, Amelia is forced to confront the darkness that has always plagued her mind and the deadly consequences of her actions. Or perhaps she can leave it all behind. As a Vietnamese queer woman, the characters' internal journeys are inspired by my experience with depression and escapism in fantasy worlds. As a content creator, I have a large platform in the online community. My YouTube channel has 500k plus subscribers, my Goodreads has 120k plus followers, and my TikTok has 100k plus followers. I also host Asian Readathon, a yearly month-long reading event to celebrate Asian authors. Additionally, I have worked in writers' rooms with Netflix to promote Shadow and Bone and script my own Netflix series on YouTube, Flirting with the Enemy. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Cindy Pham. All right. Let's break this piece of shit down. For the opener, since I don't have connections to any agents, the way that I personalized my opener was, as you can see, just directly referencing from their wish list. So that's what I would do with every query letter. I would change that first paragraph just a little bit based on whatever that agent had written in their wish list. The first thing I want to nitpick in this opener is that I wish I had specified that this was a YA fantasy instead of just fantasy. And I think I left that out at the time because I wasn't sure if the book should be young adult or adult. I saw elements of both in the story, and like a chicken, I decided not to mention it at all and just hope that the agent would fill in the gaps for themselves. Ultimately, Tao did believe that the book was both young adult and adult, like crossover, and I could have just written that as well, but I think it was kind of like a coward's way out for me to not have mentioned that. My criticism for this is more so because in the POV of an agent or a future publisher, they want to know where the book is going to sit in the shelves. So having a strong perspective on that marketability of the book would have been helpful in showing that you believe that your book has a place somewhere. And I don't think I really did at the time, but I should have at least pretended that I did. Like when I wrote the book, I wrote it just for myself and I wrote it based on things that I like in a book, and I wasn't keeping in mind the market for where the book would go. And I think that's totally fine when you're writing a book, but I think when you dive into publishing, those are just things that you have to have a POV on. Another thing that I don't like about my query letter is the comp titles that I put. So I referenced A Spindle Splintered because it's another queer Sleeping Beauty retelling that has deeper themes going on, but the writing style is very different from mine, which is why I pulled in House of Hollow for the atmosphere and the vibes. But even so, I still don't think that these are strong comps. Like these books were not very buzzy from my knowledge, even though I loved House of Hollow. And Alex E. Harrow is a really great writer, and she has so much more popular stories that I would argue are probably like higher quality books than a Spindle Splintered. Like that's kind of like more of a backlog type of book. I just think these comps were not strong at all. Maybe if I were to try to comp it now, I probably would have referenced more popular YA authors that are currently on the bestsellers list that have maybe a similar writing style to mine. Maybe I might comp it to Wicked just because there are similar themes to my story and it's kind of having a cultural moment now with the movie adaptation. Traditional publishing often favors whether something is marketable to a mainstream audience. And so that's why I have mixed feelings about comp titles, because again, I think there could be really cool, unique stories out there that don't have buzzworthy titles to compare themselves to. Now looking at the middle part of the letter where I talk about what the story is about, this was really difficult for me to condense into one page because we're following two timelines in my book. And so looking back at this and even just messaging Tao about this to see what she thought about it, we both think that the query letter was just a little bit too long, especially with the two body paragraphs here. I think that there are better ways to condense those two timelines, whether that's condensing both the two body paragraphs or just keeping it to only Corinne's timeline and having the timeline from 100 years ago be more clearly like a plot B kind of story, or at the very least rewrite it in a way where, you know, it's two different stories but they're still connected because 100 years ago does affect what's going on in the dream world. Also, some of the things in here were just not explained very well. The letter says that Corinne accidentally falls in the portal and steals the entry behind her. In the manuscript, it's not actually an accident. She had heard Ellie's voice on the other side because Ellie had made it to the dream world and she chose to jump in and just happened to seal the entry behind her. Basically, I think that it could have been improved a lot for brevity. And then we have the closing paragraph. This is where I hoard myself out. We all know publishing is not a meritocracy. People got connections with agents and they got degrees in writing, and some bitches over here got fairy dick jokes. So, you know, I gotta use whatever I can. Whether this truly worked in my favor, I will elaborate later on in this video. Let's talk about offers and rejections. Generally, the process for this when you start goes like this. You send a letter out to agents and then you either get rejected or you wait forever and never hear back from them, or you get a response asking for the full manuscript, and that's where you proceed forward. So then you send the full manuscript and then you will either get rejected or you wait forever and never hear back from them, or you get a response saying you need to revise and resubmit the story. And this happens when the agent sees the potential in the book, but it needs significant changes before it can be accepted. But the best case scenario is they'll read the full manuscript and they want to have a meeting with you, which leads to an offer of representation. Now, if you are lucky enough to receive an offer, you can send a follow-up message to all the other agents that you're still waiting to reply back to you and tell them that you have received an offer and would like to hear back from them by a specific date. So this can range from like a week to a month, depending on how much time the first agent gives you in order to respond to the offer. And this is just assuming that you plan on saying yes in the first place. With all that said, here is a breakdown of my responses that I received. Now, I won't be sharing their names for privacy reasons, but I can share what people said so that we can just get more tea or just, you know, make sense of it together and see how publishing is like. Let me start with the rejections that I had received. Dear Cindy, congratulations on your offer of representation. I appreciate your reaching out and letting me know about your deadline and for the opportunity to consider The Secret World of Briar Rose. It is an intriguing project, but I am taking on very few new projects these days, and after careful consideration, I have decided to bow out. Dear Cindy, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to read your manuscripts for The Secret World of Briar Rose, which I read with great interest. There's so much I enjoyed here. You're a fantastic writer, and the rich characters and unique world building here quickly drew me in. However, I'm not feeling that I'd be the absolute best fit as an agent for this project, so knowing that you have an offer in hand, I am going to step aside at this time. Thank you so much for sending this. Ultimately, I don't think this is quite right for me. There's a lot I love here, and the relationship is really well drawn and rich, but I got concerned it's a little bit too close to its source material, and with fantasy as crowded as it is, I am being extremely selective about what I take on. Dear Cindy, thank you for sending me The Secret World of Briar Rose. After careful consideration, I am going to pass on this project. I really enjoyed your atmospheric style and strong voice. Unfortunately, I found myself wondering if the central hook for this piece felt fresh enough. Given my reservations, this manuscript is just not a fit for me. Still, these decisions are highly subjective. I'm sure another agent or editor will have a different opinion. I am loving this book. Wow. And alas, my schedule in Hollywood has been extended, which puts me at a disadvantage reading-wise. Thank you again for the heads up on your offer and for your patience while I read. I'm not surprised you have interest. There's much to love here. That said, in the end, it's not quite a fit for me, so I'll respectfully step aside. I truly appreciate the chance to read your work early, and I look forward to seeing your name in the deal announcements. Thank you for letting me know about your offer. I'll step aside here career, but I wish you the best with all your publishing endeavors. Thank you for keeping me up to date, and congratulations on your offer. You must be thrilled. After taking some time to read and consider your material, I'm going to step aside and see to the offering agent's obvious enthusiasm. I wish you success as you move forward in your career and look forward to rooting for you from the sidelines. Thank you so much for sending along your project and for considering me as a possible agent for this work. I have so much appreciation for every writer in this process who trusts me enough to read through something so important to them. I spent some time thinking about the potential of your story and my own expertise in relation to a potential partnership. I read each query with my own list in mind and specific genres I have a need for, and at this moment, I truly believe I am not the right agent for this project at this time. I am currently looking for a few specific stories, and this one isn't quite what I know I can take on right now. This isn't to say that your work isn't incredible and wonderful, but it is to say that I know I can't bring it to the level of enthusiasm and attention it deserves. Congratulations on your offer of rep. I sincerely hope you found an amazing champion. Dear Cindy, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I will have to pass. While I love the concept, I have something very similar on my list. Dear Cindy, thank you for thinking of me for this project. Although I won't be pursuing representation, I appreciate the opportunity to consider your work and wish you every success. Dear Cindy, thank you so much for querying me. However, I must regretfully pass at this time. I truly wish you the best in finding the right agent and with your writing career. This is not right for me, but thank you for the look. Dear Cindy, thank you so much for your query. I read your pages with interest, but unfortunately your manuscript isn't the right fit for me. I'm going to pass, but I hope you'll keep me in mind should you find yourself with a new manuscript to query. Hi Cindy, thanks so much for thinking of me with this project. Unfortunately, even though there are some great elements, it didn't quite spark for me. Please keep in mind this is an incredibly subjective business, so I encourage you to keep submitting, and I hope other agents feel differently. So those were a few reasons why I had gotten rejected. A lot of it was just people not feeling like they connected with enough, or they felt like they weren't the right fit. And it sounded like a lot of these agents had very specific things that they wanted in a story, and mine just didn't hit the very specific thing that they had in mind. There are also more generic responses I received, which I assume are just templates that the agent pulls from. Agents are so busy having to go through so many manuscripts that they don't have time to write a personalized response to every single one, especially if they're declining it. So it's just easier to copy and paste it. And then there were a handful of other agents that just did not respond to me at all. And I would just have to assume that it's because they're so swamped with so many manuscripts to work from. One of the agents that had never responded to me actually ended up messaging me on Instagram a year later after I already signed with my agent, asking if I was interested in writing a book. And then I was like, girl, I actually sent you a query letter like a year ago, but that really is an indicator to me that a lot of times agents are just so busy and swamped that they are not able to read every single query letter that they get. So now I'm going to read to you the offers that I had received. I love this book. It's tough to pull off something so thematically driven within the confines of a retelling, but you found brilliant ways to adapt the material to make this a book about human connection and human forgiveness. I'd love to work with you to take it to the next level and see what else you might produce over the course of a career. Hello, hello. Oh, what a beautiful book this was. You have a real talent for descriptive writing that is used with great skill to support your broader themes. Your exploration of depression, suicidal ideation, sisterhood, healing, and grief is honed, well-connected, and nuanced. What's more, with an ensemble cast of characters and a split timeline, I found your connections between people, places, and times to be extraordinarily clever. There was a real, clear, thoughtful premise here that you used to bind the story elements together. I just finished reading your novel, and I love it. What day/times are you available next week for a call? Redacted, pass your query for The Secret World of Briar Rose on to me, as she isn't actively signing new clients at the moment, but thought I might be interested. I was super excited to take a look, and the manuscript drew me in right away. Your writing is beautiful, and your premise, framing the Sleeping Beauty story through the lens of Corinne's journey to find Ellie, makes the fairy tale feel fresh and urgent. And then the last email, which I can reveal is Tao, because she's the agent that I chose, is actually a message that she sent me while she was still reading the full manuscript, but it was a big indicator that she was going to give me an offer. She said, hope you don't mind me moving our conversation from query manager to email. I am really enjoying my reading of The Secret World of Briar Rose. I hope to wrap up reading soon and be in touch. I'm not surprised at all you're getting so much interest. Thank you for keeping me updated. More to come from me before your deadline for sure. And so basically, like with these offer emails, we scheduled a video call for me to meet with the person. On the call, they would go in detail about what they liked about the story and where they would pitch the story to publishers and where they see it fitting into the market and their plans for it and their communication styles. Last week, as I was planning this video, I also decided to email Tao to ask her what made her decide to offer representation to me. And she had replied, so I love romance and romantasy, but I have a lot of it on my list. When your work came my way, it was very different from what I was already currently working on. I loved the lyrical writing, the dreamy atmosphere, the social commentary, and the depiction of the sisters trying to survive in a dilapidated fairy tale really appealed to me. I felt like I didn't currently have anything like it on my list, and I was excited to work on it. I think if anything, it really goes to show how subjective everything is. One agent could could consider the story to be too similar to the other stuff that they have on their list, while another agent could feel like it's totally different from everything else they have. One agent could feel like it is too close to the source material, while other agents could feel like it transforms the source material or it offers something fresh and new. Ultimately, it's all just like different opinions and personal preferences. And so that's what I just try to keep in mind while I was going through the query process. I found it to be a lot of fun because I was taking the ego out of it and just trying to see it as like a way for me to learn how publishing really works behind the scenes. And so I was always excited to get a new email in my inbox. Even if it was a rejection, I felt like it was always one step closer to finding the right agent who would want the manuscript and who would believe in the story and have the same vision for the story as I do. So basically, to summarize it, I got, I think, around like 13 to 15 rejections from agents. I also got a handful of agents who just didn't respond at all. Ultimately, I ended up with 4 offers. And so now I want to get into how I approached going on these offer calls and what to do after you get the offer. What I did prior to every call was have a big list of questions for what to ask them. Because even though it can be very exciting to receive an offer from an agent, it doesn't mean that you should say yes to the offer if the agent isn't a good fit for you. So some of the questions I had were basically like, do you have any publishers or editors in mind for this book already? Where do you see the book fitting into the market? Do you feel like the book is in a good place to pitch to editors, or do you feel like the book needs to be revised? And if so, how many rounds of revisions do you think we need before it's ready to be published? And speaking of revising and editing, does this agent like to be editorial? How do they deliver notes? Do they do line edits, or do they just do like general broader feedback about story development and character development? How do they even communicate? Is it primarily through email? Is it phone, texting? What is their typical response time when you have a general question versus if you have an urgent request? If you are a writer that has other ideas for books that may be in different genres or categories, is this something that the agent would also be interested in representing? If this agent were to ever move to a different company or agency or leave agenting altogether, what would happen to their client? Another thing that I requested from every agent that had given me an offer of representation was at least 3 references for authors that they work for. And this should be a mixture of both writers who have had their books published and writers who still haven't had their books published yet, because I want to know if the agent treats them any differently. So once the agent sent me their references and the email addresses for those authors, I would basically email them with a list of questions, including what has your experience been overall with this agent and with this agency in general? What are both the pros and the cons of working with this person? How do you feel about this person's communication style? How do you feel about their editorial style? So I had good conversations with all of the references I contacted, and I think I would have been happy with any of the agents that had offered me representation. But ultimately, the reason why I chose Tao was for a couple of different things. One of the things that stood out to me was that when she introduced herself to me and gave the whole spiel about how she works, how she communicates, what the strategy she has for the book, and how she sees it positioning in the market, she hit every question that I had on my list without me having to ask them in the first place. And I think the fact that she literally like hit it so smoothly and covered all of those bases showed that she was thinking of those things at the top of her mind as well. And it also showed her level of experience, because she's been an agent at the current agency she works at for 11 years. That was another reason why most likely she probably isn't going to be switching to another agency anytime soon, and I wouldn't have to worry about where I would be going. She had a really clear POV and strategy for how to position the book and which publisher she would go for, and this strategy made the most sense to me. For example, another agent that I had talked to wanted to pitch my book to a very popular romantasy publisher, because that publisher gives a lot of marketing support to the books that they feature to make it very buzzy. And so I can see how that makes a lot of sense with combining, my platform and social media clout with their prowess as well. What I appreciated about Tao was that she's very mindful about what best suits the story. For example, when we evaluate the young adult market, it's very broad. A lot of things can fit under the umbrella of YA. She had a lot of specific perspectives about different editors that would be a good match as well. For example, the editor that I ultimately ended up with, she had chosen that specific editor to pitch to because that editor has had a lot of experience with young adult adult books, as well as a literary background. And so she knew that most likely that editor would vibe with my writing the best. Ultimately, I think it's like her business and knowledge of the market that felt the most unique to me, because that's like a big thing that I'm lacking. I wrote this book for fun on my own, so I'm not keeping in mind like what is trending in publishing, whereas she has a pretty good pulse check on it. The primary purpose of an agent is to be that business person that knows how the market works and can fill in the gaps that you don't know. And she was a great fit for that. And how she described the way that she interpreted the relationship between my main characters was spot on. It was an explanation that I had not given to her prior to it. It was just how she read it from the text. That was another reason why I felt like we were on the same page when it came to a lot of things. Ultimately, I think if I had signed with any of the other agents, I still would have had a good time. Even if we had any differences in opinions, I'm sure those agents would be very open to having a conversation with me. But Tao seemed like a person where I would just have less back and forth on, because she was already like on the same page when it came to my book. Whatever she felt was best, I was totally fine with. I didn't feel the need to like micromanage or try to evaluate every single suggestion she gave, because everything just sounded great to me. And again, considering I'm not a full-time author, I don't really have as much time to devote into like the business side of publishing. So that's really nice to just feel comfortable with someone to be like, yep, everything that you just sent me sounds totally good to go in my book. Now I want to end this video with the last topic of discussion. How much did being an influencer really help during this querying process? So in my initial call with my agent, when she first gave me the offer, she said that she would have given me this offer even if I had been an anonymous writer, which is very sweet, but that's not the kind of juicy answer we want. I know that my viewers want more tea than that. And so that's why last week when I was scripting this video, I sent her an email asking her, I know you had said that you would have given me an offer anyway, even if I didn't have a platform, but real talk, how much do you think being an influencer actually helps with becoming an author? And this is what she said. I do think in this day and age, having a platform helps because you have a built-in audience, but I have also turned down several authors with platforms in the past because I didn't connect with their writing in the way that I had hoped. It has to be an intersection of, I love this writing a story and I'm willing to read their manuscript many, many times, as well as I think I have a strategy for this author and their platform will be helpful. If I can't do the former, the platform wouldn't be helpful because I wouldn't be the right champion for that person. So I think her answer, even though it's like in the middle ground, really reflects the reality of it, which is evident in, you know, the different offers and rejections that I read out loud in this video. I really think it depends on the agent, which I know isn't like juicy answer for people who want, you know, very easy narratives to cling on to, but I really think that, you know, there will definitely be people who will want to sign authors because they have a built-in audience. But I would argue that if that's the only reason why they would offer to represent you, they're probably not a good agent. I would hope that most agents are not like that. And that seems to be the case with agents that I chose to query. And I have a lot of respect for the agents who rejected me because they weren't feeling the story, because that's how you know they're not trying to get an easy win with working with an influencer. Because when you have a platform and you decide to be an author, it does give you an advantage, and agents know that. So I think it's very big for an agent to be like, I am not passionate enough about the story or have a strong enough vision to take it on, and so I'm willing to step down from it or reject it. I do think that having a platform ended up giving me a much quicker turnaround for the querying process. So for reference, the first offer for representation came to me around like 1 or 2 weeks after I queried them, because that agent was really fast and on top of things. And then my second offer also came from another agent who was known to be fast. The other offers that I got later in the month was from people who were busier, but they made my manuscript a priority because of the other offers and deadline that I had to give an answer. But in the end, I accepted an offer of representation from my agent after a month into the querying process. And this is not a normal timeline. The reality of querying is that it can take several months and even several years for you to get anywhere. And I've also heard that the standard for waiting before you can nudge an agent to respond to you if you haven't heard from them in a while is 3 months minimum. So literally the entire process is just waiting and having a dry inbox. And every now and then, every few weeks or every few months, maybe you'll get something, and most likely that will probably be like a rejection. Also, sometimes you'll never hear from an agent at all. So it's a very grueling process. Maybe it was a quick turnaround because I focused on agents who were fast responders in my first batch to get the ball rolling. But I think that's also a risky move because maybe the right agent you want simply doesn't have the time to read a whole ass manuscript manuscript in a shorter timeline, and they would rather pass on the book. But the point is, I felt more comfortable and emboldened to play it like that because I have that privilege of knowing I will most likely get an offer due to my platform. And even if having a social media following doesn't dictate whether you get an agent or not, it definitely doesn't hurt. Like, it only adds points in your favor. So basically, I kind of see it as like being a Nepo baby. And you know how Nepo babies say that they had to audition like everyone else to get the part? But the thing about that is they don't mention how it was easy for them to get in that audition room in the first place. But at the same time, when the product comes out, the court of public opinion will decide whether it's ass or not. So I feel like a Nepo baby in that regard, except instead of being born with rich parents, I have a dumb YouTube channel. All that being said, I think if you are wondering if you should become an influencer to get your book published, my personal opinion is that you should only post on social media if you're actually interested in doing so. If you're not interested, I don't think it's worth it, because it's such a lightning in a bottle moment to blow up on social media, and it doesn't guarantee an agent will give you an offer. This is assuming you want an actual good agent. And so if you're genuinely not into it, then I think you're just creating more work for yourself. And then I think that's just working harder instead of working smarter. I think it's more important to focus on your actual writing instead, and to prioritize craft instead of clout, because that's ultimately the more important reason why an agent will want your book, at least a good agent. You don't want to be handed a book deal and then have your actual book end up being dog shit because you spent more time marketing the book than actually working on the book. If you find social media to be draining and you're just forcing yourself to do this, then I don't think it's worth it. And if you're only doing it in the hopes of getting clout, I also feel like that's going to be obvious to people. So I don't know, it just won't feel authentic. I would just advise people to do what feels right for them. And don't worry about giving yourself a bunch of extra work if it doesn't feel true to you and if it's not what you actually want to do. So those are just my 2 cents. Of course, if you do like attention and brain rotting yourself with social media, then sure, you can go ahead and have fun with it, but not everyone is built like that. I feel like most of us would rather just work on our book. I happen to enjoy both, and I'm lucky to be in this position, but you know, I still try to put mental boundaries with social media so that I don't get too lost in the sauce. In the next publishing video that I'll post, I will talk more in detail about the submissions process. This is the point in time where my agent was pitching my book to a bunch of different editors from different publishers. And so in my video, I will be reading the rejections that I got, because I know you want the tea. And I'm also going to tell you right now, even though my querying process was super fast, when it came to submissions to try to find the right publisher for this book, that took way longer, like several months long. And so I'll talk more in detail about that, because I think it really showed to me how fickle the publishing industry is. In the meantime, I hope that this video was informative or interesting to you. The next video that I post will be a roast video, so we will still continue the fun times ahead of us. So until then, I will see you next time, and goodbye.